Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming back to take part in the PIR Part 2 webinar, Focus on Family Services and Referrals. I know I started yesterday, for those who have done both in a row, by saying that I thought that would be a short presentation, and it was not. So I'm leery of saying that again, but I do believe that we're fairly focused on some specific items, and we can move through that fairly quickly. For those of you who are about to ask, yes, we are going to record. We are recording this presentation, and we're going to send out the link to it this afternoon, as well as the link to yesterday. It will take some time to convert it to a format that we can post. So probably we will not see that go out until after 2:30. We'll also include a PDF of both yesterday's and today's PowerPoint presentations and the form that we looked at yesterday for teacher turnover. So those things are going out this afternoon, and we'll try to make that as fast as possible, but we do have to convert this presentation first. So today is part 2. We looked at teachers and staff and how to document turnover and qualifications and so on yesterday. Today we are going to be focused on family services and referrals, because this is a section that's changed probably the most dramatically since the last time we reported the PIR. So our goals today are fairly simple. We would like to make sure staff are able to update and complete the items on family services. These are C43 through C50, and turn that around so we can get an updated view of where our program sits at the end of our funding year, which, believe it or not, is coming up in 20 days at the end of the month. And also, in general, working to increase knowledge of how to enter family service information correctly in COPA to help monitoring and reporting overall. So we're going to go over how to enter family service information so that the PIR properly reports those activities, and increase the familiarity that everyone has with the new categories of family services, which were changed recently. So the key takeaway points are going to be our grant period is ending June 30th, and we needed to be able to get an accurate snapshot of the state of services at that time to report. I don't know that we'll have everything that we'll be able to upload the final report, but that will be the date as of which we are reporting. So we'd like to get the information out of there and have a completed, or at least a complete PIR for everybody by the end of the month. Also, the other takeaway is that existing family service and referral records might not be showing up on the PIR, and that's because the questions have been changed, and COPA was recently updated to reflect the new questions that we received from HHS. So the old categories may not be correct. This doesn't necessarily mean you need all new services. You can probably look at the ones that were delivered already and pick a new category for them so that they will show up on one of the lines that is currently on the PIR. So for people who are with us the first time, due to last year being last year, some people who came on board as long ago as 2019 haven't actually reported a PIR. So just to review for those folks, the Office of Head Start sends us the program information report. It's a questionnaire that has many questions about the services that we provide to staff, children, and families in both Head Start and all of our early Head Start programs. So grantees and delegates all submit a report annually, unless it's 2020. So a report has to be submitted for each agency and each program. That means if your delegate agency has a Head Start program, Early Head Start funded children, and Early Head Start Child Care Partnership funded program, there will be 3 separate PIRs that are submitted to the feds, one for each funding stream. The grantee puts that together. We draw those responses primarily from COPA data, but there are some items that we need to follow up with you about because we don't see them as accurate, or else COPA doesn't quite produce them in a format that we can use. Last year, again, because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that a year ago at this point we were still mostly closed, we did not report the PIR. So we haven't done it since 2019. Since the last time we put one in, significant changes have been made to the reports, and the items are being asked are either new or being asked in a different way in many cases. So most of the data is the same, and for the most part, we're able to look at the PIR in COPA and pull out the data to enter into the federal website. But there are 3 areas where there have been significant changes made, or there are significant gaps in the information that we need to have fixed before we can report. So one of those is human resources, which we covered yesterday. Today we're looking at family services and referrals, and then on Monday we will take a look at the new items in the disabilities section. All right. So the new PIR is report 999F in COPA. You can still see what the old one looked like. It was just plain old 999 in COPA, and you can see that it's been restructured and there have been new items. Section C in particular reports information on child and family services and outcomes, including health status, developmental screenings, and disabilities. But it also reports on family demographics and on the referrals and services given to families. So items C33 through C38 are the items that have to do with family demographics, and those are pulled from the family data sheet. Assuming that you have enrolled the families and documented the fact that they're enrolled and completed the required fields, there's nothing else that you particularly need to do. We can pull the report, and it just pulls from all the families that have been enrolled at any point since we did rollover on September 8th of 2020. The only issue with demographics that we see come up is we believe there is an undercount on item C35, which is parent guardian education. So just to be aware, if you look at that and it looks funny to you, that's because parents whose educational background is reported as either unknown or 12th grade, as opposed to high school diploma, are counted under C35D, which is less than a high school graduate. So while that is a significant chunk of our population, I still believe that it is an overstatement on the reports that we submit. So you might want to take a look at that and make sure that it's documented accurately for all families that have been enrolled. Now the big one, the family services section, is the part that's been substantially updated since the last time we submitted a report. So this is what the Office of Head Start has given us as guidance. We should report the number of families that received any of the following services. Families may be counted on more than one category. You'll notice, though, that if you count them several times, they'll only count once in the bottom, which totals them up. Only include families that received services directly through the program or through program referrals. Please count only those families that actually received the services, not those that were referred and either did not go or were not yet able to receive the services. And you'll see how you account for that in a minute. The second is that families who attend educational presentations, including those provided through electronic means, such as online training modules, may be counted as receiving a service. However, if you're giving brochures and pamphlets to all families, those should not be counted on the PIR. Okay. So the numbers that we are reporting on C43 are derived from the Family Referrals and Services tab in the Family Record. So when you go and put a referral in from the Family Record, it will be counted on the PIR this year. If it's marked as received services, and that's a bit different than what we did last year, where or 2 years ago, where we were counting desired services and also services received. This year they've gone back to just counting received services. So any item that's marked that way will show up. On the other hand, if you have placed in referrals, but under their status, you've marked them as ongoing or complete, those will not show up on the PIR. It's only counting those with a received services status. So that's one reason right there why they may not be showing up. But here's the bigger reason. So they've changed the way that the categories are organized. So in the past, there was a broad category. There was a line item under the list of family services that said parenting education, and many agencies had a large number of families documented with that as the service. However, that's actually been removed from the current PIR, and it's been replaced by a number of categories, and there are also a couple more specific categories that were here from last year and before that can also be counted, or some of the things that were labeled as parenting education may be able to count there instead. But the big new ones that they've added in the place of parenting education are the research-based parenting curriculum, involvement in discussing the child's screening and assessment results, supporting transitions within programs, and that when they say that, we're talking about transitions, for example, from Head Start or from early Head Start to Head Start, or for 4-year-olds with families that help them transition out of the program into kindergarten. It's not a separate family service, and so everybody that's received assistance in those areas should be marked that way. Also, nutrition is its own category, education on nutrition. And for particularly early Head Start and programs that have served pregnant moms, education on postpartum care is also a new category. So all of those previously would have been counted under the field parenting education. So and since they're newly added, when you look at your PIR, you probably don't see anything identified under those categories, and it's because they weren't there before roughly April. So what you probably need to do is go back into the system, look at your existing referrals, and simply change the type from parenting education to one of the new ones that counts on the PIR. So entering referral, this has changed fairly recently, but not as recently as the PIR, so I'm going to go over it anyway. When you go within the family file, when you're submitting a referral, you need to select a referral reason from the menu. And there's a wide variety of these, and like I said, some of these are very new. We added them in response to the new PIR. So when you select a referral reason, it's automatically going to assign a referral service area if the reason that you selected is one that has been mapped to a specific area. So here the example that I have for the test case, I marked debt counseling, and that automatically populated the referral service area. You have to have a reason. You can't personally manually edit the referral service areas. They're just based on the mapping that came from the reason. So if you have a reason that you believe should be mapped somewhere, but it's not in the system, you have to let us know. I can add that to the menu if there is a new type of service that you feel like you should be able to count. And it is these referral service areas that are mapped to specific PIR items. So the second thing, although they've removed from the PIR the section that covered what services are desired by the family, that section is still active. So what happens now if you add a referral for an area that wasn't previously identified as the desired service, COPA is just going to ask you if you want to add it. So you don't have to go back to the family's record main page anymore and add a new desired area to make it show up. like we did a couple years ago. Instead, it will just ask you if you want to add it to the list. You hit OK, and it will edit the sort of the front page of the family data sheet to add the desired service area that you've just requested. Okay, so we are going to send this out to you this afternoon. So you don't actually have to remember this. I built this grid because it's easier to have a reference sheet that we send out to everyone to figure out what happened. But for each service area our service type on the new PIR, which is the left-hand column, we have at least one and sometimes more than one item that maps to that specific PIR item, and it does so, as I said, by mapping to a service area that's connected to one of the ones that we receive that are defined by Office of Head Start. If you look here, emergency crisis intervention just is what it is, as with housing assistance, but we've broken out some of these categories. So budget nutrition was a previous category in COPA, and we remapped it so those would count. And we also added debt counseling, which also maps to the asset building services, which is the new name for financial education in COPA, or rather in Head Start. And COPA, we're just following along what we have received from the Office of Head Start. So again, this was actually on the old one, but I did not notice it previously, so I'm not sure when it was added. But substance abuse, which substance abuse services used to be a single line, is now broken out into substance abuse services and substance abuse treatment, which makes me suspect by services what they mean is prevention. So we have prevention and treatment as separate categories. Since treatment is new, we don't have any records that were mapped to that, at least at the time when I did the remapping. So if you have substance abuse services in there and it was actually a referral to rehab, you want to go in and change it from services to treatment just so that it maps correctly on the right line of the PIR. Okay. So we have at our previous skills development category, we've also directly put in a job training category, so that those map to the assistance in enrolling into education and job training category. So that will map to C43H. We have added the research-based parenting curriculum because that was that's the new language on the PIR. In terms of their item that is discussing child screening and assessment results, we've broken them out because those are very different things in our program. So we have discussing child's developmental screening results, and that would have to do with discussions that had to do with the EZR or ASQ. And then we put in discussing the observational assessment, which has to do with gold. So those are separate categories, but they both map to that same PIR item, which is C43J. And then there's the transition services I was talking about. What else do they add? I think smoking cessation is new-ish. Postpartum care is now its own category. Nutrition is its own now, so we've broken that out separate. We had a budget nutrition category that's pre-existing. That probably should just be treated as budget, and information on actually dietary health and nutrition is its own category. And then relationship counseling, assistance to incarcerated family. So that's the grid. What we're asking you to do with that is simply look at everything that was labeled as parenting education previously, and then decide whether any of those can be re-slotted into one of the new categories so that we can show a variety of different services on the new PIR related to what the feds are asking for. So long timers will remember the days in which HHS sent out a new PIR with substantially different questions basically every year. But for the past almost decade now, we've had a nearly identical report every year. So these are the biggest changes we've had for some time. But they're not that big. So again, it's just a matter of deciding the types of services that you're usually referring or providing to families, and then reclassifying them to be more specific. The next section, as father engagement, this hasn't changed, but when we look through it, it's probably missing in a number of cases because the strange way that COPA collects this information. So most of the family services come from the family data sheet, but if you look at the family data sheet in COPA, you will see that we don't have any of these questions there. So these items are actually tracked at the child level, which is amazing to me. But that's true. At the bottom of the child data sheet, almost down to where you get to the enrollment record, you'll see the father or father figure participation field. So in this place, you can check any of the 5 items under father figure engaged in the following activities, and those do map to C45A through E, and that's where you record that. Now, the reason I say I think it's an odd way to do this is it seems like you would have double counting in the case of siblings. And I don't really have a workaround for that right now, but this is how we do it. So we would rather make sure that it's in there rather than have it be missing. It's a tricky place. You probably didn't know it was there either. I was certainly surprised. Okay, so the next section, we have a number of what looks like inconsistent data every time we report the PIR. And that's a source of concern because reporting on the number of homeless families that we have is fairly important. Not only is this a category of children who are categorically eligible under Head Start, but compared to other jurisdictions, due to the housing crisis that we have in the city, the number of homeless families that we are serving is probably a higher proportion of our population than the program does nationally. So we want to capture that because it gets to a lot of things, including the struggles that our parents are having, our need for more resources, and some of our difficulties with recruiting and retaining families. So it's important to capture this. We use a fairly broad definition of homelessness that comes from the McKinney-Vento Homeless Education Act, which was part of the No Child Left Behind bill that passed 15 years or so ago. So the definition contains several different types of homelessness. This can be children who are sharing housing with others due to a loss of housing from economic hardship or other things. They're living in motels, hotels, or trailer parks, who have a primary residence that's not really a place that is designed for housing, or if they're living in cars or parks, public spaces, or so on. So it's a broader definition than simply families that are in a shelter on the street. So you will notice, if you're familiar with the universal application, that when someone applies online looking for a spot, they ask these specific questions about their housing situation, and filling in any of those that fit the definition will have them automatically marked as homeless. But that's not necessarily the case when a family comes in. So you should be aware of the broadness of the definition. When you find out about how they're living, you may find that they're categorically eligible. And so in any case where a family meets these criteria, we want to document that as their reason for eligibility. In the Head Start world, that's more important than low income, and it supersedes whatever their income may be. So that's what we would do. And that's how you get the homeless family identified. So the tricky part here is that families and children track homeless status separately. So it is possible to mark a primary caregiver as homeless and the child isn't counted, or vice versa. In pretty much any case that I can think of, that would be incorrect. So the children of a homeless parent should be identified as homeless and vice versa. So on the family, it's marked under the current housing status. If that is homeless, then they count as homeless. And then when you mark homeless, that will again open up that menu and give you the further menu to break down where under the McKinney-Vento Act that they count as homeless. So just to remind you that it's a broader definition. And anyone with a response will be counted on C46. For the children, it comes from a completely different place. So a child is identified as homeless if it's marked as homeless under their eligibility information. And probably the reason that COPA has separated that is because child homelessness is an eligibility category. So once you've marked that box and identified as a homeless child, the child will have enough points to be enrolled, and it won't consider income or other criteria other than age to exclude the child. So but that marking the child as homeless doesn't automatically mark the family as homeless. It really should. So the only explanation I've heard for there being a variety is some agencies are marking foster children as homeless, but foster children are not considered homeless. They're not on that list of McKinney-Vento reasons, but also foster children are their own categorical eligibility in Head Start. And we do track those on the PIR, but it is not under this section of C46. So foster children are counted on C49, which is a different line, and you wouldn't count them in both places. So it's kind of an either or situation. The impact on their eligibility is the same. Foster children and homeless children are treated exactly the same by our eligibility system, but we're tracking them differently because they're responses to different PIR questions. So that's why we do it the way we do. So you see there's foster parent here. It's unlikely that they would both be marked because you wouldn't place a child in the care of a homeless parent, mostly. Okay, and then the third question, which I know people struggle with because it's almost never marked. And although it is difficult to acquire housing in Chicago, it's probably more common than we've been able to report in the past. So to be counted on C48, several separate conditions need to be met. The first one is that they are no longer homeless. It's obvious, because otherwise you wouldn't count under the question that we're asking, which is, do homeless people require housing? So the current housing status needs to be not homeless. And the second thing is that that's all you do, you change their current status in COPA and save it. There isn't really a history for that item, so we don't remember that they used to be homeless, and they disappear from the report altogether. So what you want to do is, if you're working with a homeless family and they acquire housing, you need to make sure that previous housing field is populated, and it's populated with homeless. The second condition that also has to be met, I guess the third, is that the current housing date then needs to be within the program year. So because the question is how many families acquired housing during the enrollment year, they have to have a current housing date after September 8th, 2020, as well as a previous housing status of homeless. And those two things, in other words, if the family was homeless on or after September 8th, 2020, but is not now homeless, they'll be counted on C48. But all three of those fields have to be done correctly in order for them to count. Okay, so that's the homeless section. This is how you get in touch with me if you have more questions. It wasn't as short as I had hoped, but I think we did get through it pretty quickly. Again, if you have questions about specifics on this, you can get in touch with me we have other questions? Yes. Oh, the number. Well, yeah. Someone pointed out. Yes, the number of families and children will differ when there are siblings. The family is only counted once. That's true. The number of homeless children can absolutely be higher than the number of homeless families. It just shouldn't be lower. But we've seen, and when we looked through there, in some cases, we've seen that both of those, both children without parents and parents without children. So that's why we're making you aware of that. But yeah, that's very true. And as people who aren't here at the beginning of the presentation, when I make this announcement, always ask, are we going to be sending out the presentation slides? Yes, we are. We'll be sending those out this afternoon, along with the link for this video, which is being recorded. However, as I mentioned before, it'll take some time to convert it. So it'll probably be sometime after 2:30 this afternoon. We will be sending out these slides, as well as the slides from yesterday, which I know we promised to get out at that time, but I mean, we had some technical difficulties yesterday, which people might have noticed, and we just a lot going on. But we should get those out sometime after 2:30. You'll be getting the presentation. Okay. And do we have any other questions while we're here? For referrals that have already been input in COPA, we don't need to input them again, is the question. You should be able to simply go back to the referral and change the reason. So, and then resave it. So if it said parenting education before, you can just go in there and change it to a more specific category and hit save, and it should suddenly pop up on the PIR. But that's my understanding. I played with that a little bit. It seemed to work with my test family. Okay, so the mental health tab on the children's section, is that just for kids consistently are seeing consistent therapy, or the mental health provider comes out, do we put it there too? At this point, it's just going to be for children who have been basically individually referred for services or are receiving ongoing therapy. We're not documenting the what do you call it, the classroom observations in COPA. This is one of our struggles with our current information environment, which we hope to address over the next year. Yes, the reason that we don't put classroom observation information into individual child files is essentially HIPAA. So what we really need to make sure that we can document things, but also not have a classroom observation on an individual child file, which may then contain information about a different child. What we would want to do is have a classroom level report that could be documented. Since we don't have that right now, essentially the classroom observations by the mental health professionals are not on, they're offline, they're not documented in COPA at this time. And that's not really what they're asking. They're asking on the PIR for the very specific, did the child receive this service or that service? So for that item, I believe the only things that they want to know are if there were cases in which the mental health provider consulted with staff about an individual child or with the family about individual child, and then was a referral made for services, and if so, were services received. That's what the mental health section is about. So much of the work that the mental health professionals do is not in COPA. How far back can we go for changing referrals? As I mentioned, the PIR is a cumulative report for the program year, which means it looks at children and families served and services delivered during the current year. And our year started September 8th, 2020. So we can add or edit referrals going back to that point. Referrals that are older than that, I mean, I don't think the system will stop you from editing them, but they do not show up on the PIR because they're September 5th, 2020 counts, and before counts as the 2019 to 2020 program year. That would have been covered on last year's PIR if we submitted one, but as we did not, all of that data just floats off into the ether, I guess. Yes. If a child was determined eligible because of homelessness, but homeless wasn't checked under the eligibility at the time, should we put in a ticket to change the eligibility snapshot? Yes, you should. And I'm not entirely certain if I can do that even, but I will try if that's the case. If not, another way to update an eligibility status is just to create a new snapshot, which you can do by dropping the child and then re-enrolling them, and the new enrollment date will produce a new snapshot, the new status. But we can probably edit that. There are some things we can edit about the snapshot and some things that we can't. Okay, I am new to this. Can you tell me what PIR stands for? So the PIR is the Program Information Report. Again, that was covered in the first slide, so you'll see that when we send these out today. And a lot of people are new to this because, as I mentioned, we didn't do it last year. So the last PIR that we submitted went in on April 30 or August 30th, 2019, in the before times. We are experiencing where our referrals are not populating on the PIR and receive services as checked. Why is this? It's probably because the referral reason given isn't one of those that is mapped to the PIR. It may also be that the family is not being counted as a whole in some way. We would have to look at that. My other thought is that this was a big struggle. So as of a few weeks ago, I also wasn't able to make anything populated on the PIR from Family Services. And then we went back in and did a lot of remapping and worked with COPA to change some things. So if you tried a couple of weeks ago and things were not showing up, look in there again. I think we fixed most of these. Okay, so here's a big one. What's the average wait time for a COPA ticket to be resolved? The answer is we lost our vendor, our consultants that were processing those, and we are working to onboard new staff who will do that. But currently, the wait time is very long because the position for processing them has been vacant, and we're trying to get to them when we can get to them around our other job, but we are very, very busy. So I met with someone just last week. We're onboarding somebody who should be able to get through the outstanding tickets. Hopefully within a couple of days here, he is ready to go. And it's just a question of making sure all the access and everything is in place. So the referral report shows all families, but the PIR does not. I just pulled it yesterday. Well, the PIR doesn't show all families. It's being filtered by the funding source of under which they're enrolled. So it's only a subset with a particular program models for the children. Probably what's going on. How should parents as teachers or other parent curriculums and newsletters be counted as? There's only case notes and referrals as well. Well, as the information that we got being specific about what we can count from the Office of Head Start stated, if it's something that's provided to every family, then it doesn't count as a separate service or referral. There's actually another point on the PIR that we don't really talk to you about because it's something that we fill in as the grantee and you don't have to worry about. But earlier in the section C of the PIR, I do have a question about what curriculum are being used. And so for everybody that's got parents as teachers, as a home visiting curriculum, we will note that, and we actually include that in the report. But it's not a specific service to a specific family. It's just an answer to a question that asks what curriculum we are using. Let's see. How do you add schools for children transitioning to kindergarten? I don't know that we need to add that. I will look into that. I mean, we have a list of schools in our system, but they're only there because these are schools that are providing preschool for all services on the universal application. So obviously that's not every school that has children. And so CPS schools that don't do early childhood are not in COPA. So I don't know if we need to add them, or perhaps we don't really need to put that in there specifically. But I will look into that. I know that it would be difficult to add them to the menu because we would have to do a whole site profile for them. We don't want to, because they're not in our system. In regards to marking only received services tab when families follow through with referral, do we then mark as in progress? What happens if the family does not follow through on the referral? Do we mark declined, and how would this affect our numbers? So based on the information that we got, the block of text that I showed you earlier, which we just quoted directly from the report that we get from the feds, only families who have received the service should be counted on the PIR. So we are now at the end of the program year. The actual answer to this is you probably put in everything when you first put in a referral as new or ongoing or in progress. But now that we're coming to the end of the program year, you should be going back and changing that status. So let's say you made a referral to a family in February, you should now follow up, and either they received it or they didn't. And you would thus mark it as declined if they didn't follow through, or mark it as received services if they did. But at this point, because it's a time-limited question, and we're trying to figure out what happened in the program year that's basically ending, we just want to know their status now. So if it's ongoing at the moment, you would put received services because they received services during the program year. And really, what we need to do is close out all of the open referrals and services for the 2020 to 2021 program year. And then under our new grant, and we'll start a new year, if they're receiving the same service still, we'll need to put in a new referral for that anyway. And the reason for that is something that I just covered. Referral dates that are in the system from this year will not count on the next PIR. So we're in a gray area right now where we're going to be in transition, and I don't know exactly what the rest of the summer will look like. Next year, though, we will report the 2022 PIR, and the school year is starting earlier, so only referrals and services that are dated after August 30th, 2021 will count. So even if you make additional services or referrals during the summer, you will have to put a new referral in with a new date after we roll over, because the next PIR will be covering the period of August, the end of August 2021 through August 2022, and won't include anything that was made this year. So even if it's an ongoing service, like you referred someone to adult education class and they're still taking the class, and next year they'll still be taking the class, it's a new referral for next year because we'll need it to have a date is after we roll over. Just like if you made a referral in August of 2020, that doesn't count on this PIR because there's a cutoff as of the rollover. So if that were the case, even if they were receiving, they started, say, taking a class last summer and continue to take it for the fall semester of this past year, they would need a new referral with a date after September 8th in order to populate on the PIR. Nothing from before September 8th is going to count, because that was the year that wasn't, I guess, since we didn't report. Normally, I would say that would have been reported on last year's PIR, but there wasn't one. So again, anything from last year, from last summer that you want to count, it needs to have a new September date. Okay. Okay. So that's pretty good. We're still at almost an hour, but not quite. So I am going to let you go a few minutes earlier. For people with additional questions or specific problems, you can follow up with myself or Jennifer Santana going forward over the next couple of weeks. Try to go in there if things really don't map, although I believe they do, because I created a test child and I made every single referral I could think of to the family until I populated the PIR. That's how we tested this. But if you're having trouble making somebody appear, let me know. It could be a couple things. One of them, I would make sure they're showing up on the PIR at all. There may be a problem either with their eligibility snapshot or family services or something like that, that doesn't allow the child to be included on the PIR. So if there is a child or item that is supposed to appear on the PIR but isn't, send me an email. Again, let me see if I can get back there. Here we go. I am working with one of the developers at COPA to make sure that the PIR works. We've caught a few bugs in the last few weeks and have gotten them to update them, but we do need to continue to work on that. All right. So thank you all for participating today. It's a good turnout. It's always exciting to see, and I hope we can get through this in the next few weeks and be done with this for the year. So have a great weekend, everyone, and many of you I will come back and talk to you again on Monday.